We hope that this video is beneficial to those who want to learn a little more about the work we've done and how our journey has led us to today. You're going to hear from our division leadership team. They're going to explain why we started this work, the research and best practices we identified along the way, and why we ultimately believe that this benefits students and increases learning. If you've followed these changes closely, this is probably not new information, but it should provide a good reminder and a good update to information we've shared over the last year. And for those who may not have followed these changes closely, we hope that this clarifies where we've been and where we are currently as it relates to grading practice changes in our classrooms. To begin, we're going to talk a little bit about why we first began to take a closer look at our grading practices and why we ultimately felt these changes were necessary. Prior to the pandemic, a frequently voiced concern of students and parents was in fact grading. The inconsistency in grading across a course team was a common source of frustration, and this was highlighted in the 2018-2019 School Climate Survey, student comments shared during our Peaceable Schools Initiative forums, and during our informal conversations and messages as well. This student email from a few years ago is just one example of the communications that occurred around grading practices over the last couple of years. It was messages like this that prompted our staff to research this topic further, and what we found was that the inconsistencies were confirmed. The other primary component of this journey involves the work that our staff has done to collaborate with each other and to continuously improve their practices in teaching and supporting students. Many of the best practices in grading that we studied were and are happening in our own classrooms here at LT. And as our staff continued to innovate, the inconsistencies grew. So as we do with all potential concerns, we dig a little deeper, we reflect on the impact, we apply learning, and we work collaboratively with our staff to make improvements.
Frustrations occur, but when they add up, it calls for an investigation. So in an effort to substantiate the shared concerns, we surveyed teachers during the 2018-2019 school year on their grading practices. Teachers completed a survey for every course that they taught. The survey did substantiate the complaints that had been voiced. The survey results revealed 66% of classes were counting homework in the final grade. 22% of classes were not counting homework in the final grade. The remaining 12% did not report one way or another. While 66% of classes were counting homework in the final grade, they were doing so in different ways. 53% gave points simply for doing it, and 49% gave points based on whether it was completed accurately or correctly. 2% of classes reported grading homework for both completion and accuracy. Additionally, the survey showed 8% of classes would not allow students to turn in late work, meaning you got a 0 when life happened and you couldn't get your work done in one night. 47% penalized students for turning the work in late, meaning they didn't get all the credit, and 42% allowed work to be turned in at any point in time. The survey also demonstrated that 32% of classes reported not offering retakes. 41% reported providing retakes on all summative assessments. The remainder of the classes fell in between these extremes. Since the survey was self-reported by teachers, gradebooks of teachers of the same course were reviewed to further substantiate the complaints of parents and students and the teacher survey results. In all courses that were reviewed, practices across the same team were varied to the extent that a student grade could change by an entire letter depending on their teacher. All of these aforementioned sources of evidence revealed 3 major problems that needed to be changed. 1. Grades did not reflect learning, especially not when points were awarded for completion only. 2. Grades and grading practices were inconsistent across the course team, so who you had as a teacher could increase or decrease your chances of getting a particular grade. And 3. There was a lack of teacher clarity regarding grading.
Many students and parents have wondered how a change in our grading practices may impact the college admissions process, so I would like to share a few key points. Our transcripts, which are the official academic record that are sent to colleges and universities, only include the final semester grades A through F. Pluses and minuses are not included on the transcript. Colleges do not receive quarter grades, only semester grades. Colleges receive transcripts from all over the country and are well versed in translating a multitude of non-traditional transcripts. Each college or university has its own system for converting grades and marks to a GPA for an apples-to-apples comparison of students' achievement. This is just one part of the plan that each college or university has to ensure equitable comparison of applicants. Each school submits an official school profile that provides information about the courses offered and the overall academic achievement of our student body, as measured by things such as standardized assessments, so that colleges can accurately understand the rigor of our programming. The information is included in the unique system each college designs and uses to evaluate applicants.
A grade should be accurate. All grades should be mathematically sound, consistent, easy to understand, and descriptive of each student's academic level of performance.
You've just heard that grades must be accurate. Grades must also be bias resistant. Historically, traditional grading practices have reinforced a system that sorts students and decreases opportunities. Our grading practices must give everyone a chance to succeed, regardless of their home environment, culture, gender, race, or socioeconomic status. Although we strive for classrooms in which all students can and will achieve, sometimes our unconscious biases can get in the way, unfairly impacting a student's grades. Our unconscious biases are often rooted in those practices that have to do with student behaviors and not student learning. There are several changes we can make to ensure that our grades are bias resistant. The first change is to eliminate extra credit. Offering extra credit reinforces the notion that the class isn't about learning or mastery of standards, but about acquiring points. The grade is no longer a reflection of what a student knows and is able to do. It becomes a reflection of point accumulation. Beyond the fact that the points students earn through extra credit compensates for learning not achieved, offering extra credit is not equitable because it doesn't consider a student's home situation or other factors. Since extra credit is optional and beyond the scope of the course content typically, students with greater resources are often the beneficiaries of the points which pad their grades, leaving other less resourced students without that benefit. The second way we can ensure that grades are bias resistant is to eliminate point reductions for late work. We want the grade to reflect the quality of the work, not the timing of the work. Penalizing for late work creates inaccurate grades. By allowing students to turn in work late, we shift the focus on the importance of learning rather than the behavior of timeliness. In a traditional system, a student who turns in A work but turns it in late is penalized, sometimes earning a B or C on the assignment. When we take away the penalties for late work, we are sending the message that learning has a more flexible timeline and that it's better to produce high-quality work than to cut learning short. Students often shut down when there are penalties and opt not to turn in the work if they feel there is no point or points. Removing the barrier of penalizing students with points motivates them to ultimately do the work and demonstrate their learning. The third way to ensure that grades are bias resistant is to grade summative assessments only, not formative practice. In a traditional grading system, teachers often assign a grade for the correctness of homework or for the completion of homework. This would include formative practice in class and work done at home. Both practices are problematic. Homework, or practice before a summative experience, is given to students before they have mastered the material or are ready to demonstrate the learning. In a traditional system, we give students points for homework which can adversely affect the student's grade because they essentially are penalized for taking risks and making mistakes. The purpose of homework is to provide accurate feedback to both students and teachers, so students know what they need to adjust in their learning and teachers know what they need to adjust in their teaching. Homework, or formative practice, is essential to learning, but it shouldn't negatively impact a student's grade because it represents a part of the process of learning, and we want students to make mistakes. Assigning points for homework completion is also problematic, since students do the practice without the benefit of feedback. Getting points for doing something may reflect a student's effort, which is a student behavior, but grading on completion does not measure accurately what a student has learned in relationship to the course skills and content. For example, there may be a student who does all the homework, but does it all incorrectly. If a teacher is grading on completion, the teacher and the student will not know that the student is on the wrong path. When the summative assessment comes along, the student may be discouraged by a poor grade because they tried, but they didn't master the content or demonstrate the skills that were needed. The fourth way to ensure that grades are bias resistant is to exclude participation and effort. Participation points are often given in traditional grading systems to reflect behaviors that are about being ready to learn, like bringing the proper materials, coming to class on time, or asking questions. They can also be given to support the learning of the whole class, assigning points for being respectful, staying on task, or committing to the work. These types of points focus on a student's conduct rather than what they know and are able to do in relationship to the standards, and they should not be given in grading systems that value the grade as a representation of academic achievement. Finally, the fifth way to ensure that a grade is bias resistant is to assign alternative consequences for cheating. Traditionally, students earn a failing grade when they cheat or plagiarize in class. Both offenses are problematic and need to be addressed, but cheating and plagiarism are student behaviors and do not reflect what a student really knows and is able to do in class. By and large, students cheat because they don't believe they can be successful on the assignment, task, or test without cheating. A typical consequence for cheating and plagiarism is to assign a 0 for that assignment. We often don't make the students accountable for their work after they've earned the 0 with no option for a resubmission, and therefore we let the students off the hook in terms of having to demonstrate their learning. There are options for consequences when students cheat that have the aim of rehabilitating the student's behavior without distorting their grade, which should be a measure of their academic achievement only. By adhering to these practices, grades not only become more accurate, but they do become more bias resistant.
Ultimately, we want grades to be intrinsically motivating for students. When a grade represents more than a letter and actually represents learning, it becomes motivational. We all know learning happens at different rates for different students. By focusing on the most recent pieces of evidence to support a grade, a growth mindset is supported, and students realize it's the learning that's important and not the timing of the learning. Students are motivated to continue to work towards learning as opposed to giving up. When students have a chance to begin to learn new skills and information and practice this learning through formative tasks without it negatively impacting their grade, it becomes motivational because students are able to take risks and learn more in the process instead of avoiding mistakes to protect their grade. Assessment retakes motivates students to continue to learn. It grants them the opportunity to continue to work towards learning the material and redeem themselves by ultimately learning more and being rewarded for that additional learning. By utilizing rubrics, students are motivated because they provide a clear path for students. Students know what they need to do to achieve at a certain level. By developing summative assessments that are clearly aligned to learning targets, it reinforces to students the motivation to get a high grade because it represents learning instead of just a letter. By having equitable grading practices, motivation is increased because all students are on a level playing field, not advantaged or disadvantaged by factors that are out of their control. It's all about what is learned in the end.
It is important to have a common definition of what a grade is actually supposed to be. This allows increased clarity about what the grade communicates to everyone involved. Our definition of a grade is that a grade communicates a student's level of achievement toward identified learning objectives at a point in time. The district has established a vision of a grading system that shows what we want our grading system to accomplish. Our vision for a grading system is to be consistent throughout the school, equitable and fair to all students, and reflective of student performance.
The following grading guidelines were implemented in an effort to incorporate the research, data collected, and stakeholder input received over the past several years. Grades at Lyons Township High School must reflect growth and learning. They must not include behavior or soft skills. They must value knowledge and understanding, and they must not measure effort or attendance. Grades must provide a roadmap for success, and they must not measure personal organization or executive functioning. Grades must include timely, relevant, and meaningful feedback. They must not include zeros for missing work. Additionally, the following assessment guidelines were implemented. The primary purpose of summative assessment is to determine the amount of learning at a particular point in time. The primary purpose of formative assessment is to improve learning by providing feedback to students. A system of both formative and summative assessments provide the most accurate profile of a student's abilities and performance. A variety of assessment tools must be used to ensure this.
The information that has been presented thus far outlines the rationale for the shifts in grading practices that have occurred at LTHS and how these changes support our school community's efforts to meet the needs of each and every learner here at LT. Our grading practices reduce the influence of behavior, such as how compliant or outspoken a student is, and the influence of implicit bias based upon factors such as race, ethnicity, gender, or disability. They also reduce inequities due to external variables, like socioeconomic factors, access to outside resources, and support available in the home environment. And because of these shifts that we have made to remove the influence of external factors, all students can rely on their grades as an accurate tool to communicate not what they have done or how they have acted, but what they have learned. They can rely on their grades to help them make decisions about how to prioritize their time and efforts and how they select future courses and pursuits at LT and beyond. Our grading practices also enhance equity for students by reducing the impact of one day or assessment. Students have a grade-driven incentive to learn from their mistakes and demonstrate new learning on a retake assessment. These opportunities to retake assessments also allow for different speeds of learning. The old assumption that all students will master a skill by a given test date give way to an opportunity for students to focus on identified areas for growth and demonstrate later learning. Our LTHS grading practices clearly communicate our expectation that all students can learn and achieve the outcomes of their courses. They may just need different paths to get there.